Hi everyone, my name is Aria. My childhood was not like a normal one. I did not play like all the children in the yard with each other. I went to a hot summer camp. Did not go to a friend's house for a sleepover. Did not throw tantrums when I saw new toys. And all because my dad is an Admiral. At home, we always had strict rules. It was just the three of us. Dad, Mom, and me. As you understand, my father was in charge of everything. And we lived according to his schedule, even when my mother was always at home. She didn't work, she didn't have any friends, and in the most extreme cases, she went to visit her only sister. My dad is very strict. He believes that discipline is the way to success. But he forgot that we are not soldiers. My mother is a housewife, and I am a schoolgirl. And what success could we talk about? Unquestioning obedience was his main demand, and it came first. My mother and I addressed him as you. He could not even speak, but only showed my mother with his eyes what he wanted, to eat, drink, serve him newspapers, turn on the TV, and so on. But we were lucky in some ways. He was often late at work. Sometimes he didn't come home for several days. These days, my mother and I had so much fun at home. We ate sweets, watched movies late, went to bed together. My mother read me stories loudly, not in whispers. We laughed, played, and danced. That's the side of life I love the most. You know, my mom is great. She fell in love with father and married him when he was very young. My mother often remembered what my father was like when he was only a sergeant. I can't believe it, but from her words, there was no nicer person. She told me that my father ran after her, took care of her as best he could, loved her up to her ears, against the wishes of my grandmother, married my mother, and they had a daughter, me. My mother says that my father adored me. He always carried me in his arms. He spent the money he earned on toys, bought my mother things, jewelry. They did not need anything. And then, when my father was promoted to Admiral, something started happening to him. He became withdrawn, service-mad, greedy, angry. I started coming home late and very nervous. And then I started having fun with my mom. I didn't tell her, but I often heard him beating her up. I could hear her crying all night in the bathroom, see the blood on her clothes, the bruises on her body. He hits her everywhere except in the face. So even in summer, my mother wears floor-length dresses or pants and a blouse or long-sleeved shirt on top. Personally, I couldn't remember my father playing with me. I remember him as he is now. Sullen, fear-inducing. I knew that my mother's memories of him were completely different, but it didn't help at all to bring back the old man, the sergeant. Once I even suggested that my mother and I run away together, but she was intimidated. I don't know what father told her, but it obviously worked. She dreaded the thought of leaving. If I leave, he will find me, and then, my mother always said, but she never finished the sentence. I could feel her anxiety and self-doubt, but I had to do something about it. I had to help her and myself, because I didn't have the strength to live in such a nightmare anymore. I decided to talk to her again and again, again and again. It must have lasted more than a week. Every day, I started talking about how living with a tyrant is the worst fate, that leaving doesn't mean disgracing yourself, but saving yourself. My mother was crying. I saw how she wanted to leave and couldn't. She was scared, but not me. I packed my bags, put everything I needed in there, money, documents, took them out into the corridor and ran after my mother. I persuaded her to get up and go out the door. The main thing is to start. She went down the stairs and froze. My father was standing in the doorway. He looked at the bag, silently kicked it to the side, motioned for my mother to go to the bedroom, and told me to go to the kitchen. I was sitting on the ground floor behind the kitchen table and heard from the bedroom my mom's sobs and falling furniture. In all my years, I have clearly distinguished the sound of how my father punches my mother in the head, kicks her in the stomach, legs, hands, hits her head on the wall. She tried not to scream so as not to frighten me, but it didn't frighten me. I was used to it. And over time, she became angry. I picked up a knife from the kitchen and went upstairs to find my father yelling at her. He shouted that she would never leave him, and if she did, he would find us, take the child from her, and grind her to powder. My mother begged him to forgive her. She took it upon herself to try to escape. I stood and watched him. A monster. This is not a person. When he grabbed my mother by the throat and started choking her, I ran up behind him and stabbed him. I hit him in the shoulder. He screamed, more out of surprise, I think. Then he swung to hit me. But at that moment, my mother hit him on the head with a vase, and he lost consciousness. She was shaking with fear. We ran downstairs, grabbed our bags, and started running. We understood that my father had very strong connections in law enforcement, and most likely, when he wakes up, he will connect everyone to find us, so we didn't have much time. First of all, we arrived at the train station, bought tickets, and hid in the train compartment. Only there my mother relaxed a little, wiped the blood away, and then hugged me tightly and began to cry. Surprisingly, I wasn't afraid. In a way, I was glad that we had finally escaped from this tyrant. Since then, we've been wandering from city to city. Thank God I knew where the money was stored in the house, so I took everything. This was enough for us to change our image a little, make new documents, rent a house, and eat. Very soon, my mother and I plan to go far away and start life anew. Today is my mother's birthday. I gave her a handmade cake. My mother cried a lot, and then said that I had already given her 2 valuable gifts, myself and freedom. It was nice. I've learned that sometimes adults just need a little determination to make their dreams come true. It's been almost a year since we ran away. Oddly enough, we moved quietly from city to city. We didn't feel any danger or anxiety. We lived as if it had always been so. Who knows? Maybe he finally let us go?
I am the son of a senator. How does that sound to you? Sure it does. This automatically assumes a green light in all directions. And you know what? Being the son of a senator is much cooler than being a senator yourself. Would you like to visit my place and feel what it's like? I will tell you an unforgettable story. My name is Dima. I was born and raised in a family of politicians and businessmen. In principle, it is the same. So my great-grandfather and grandfather were officials or deputies. They didn't exactly dream about it. It just happened that life decided for them. Here is how I, for example, grew up the son of a senator. Did anyone ask me that? You will think that I am the greedy child of a rich father, a people's thief, a corrupt official. I will not comment or justify anything to my parents. I will only say that there is a downside, but about everything in order. As a toddler, I didn't understand all the possibilities I had. I had food, toys, parents, a house, everything for school, but I considered it mundane. When I got a little older, I started having companies, a lot of companies. Everyone wanted to be friends with me. I was popular. I had the coolest car in school and an expensive phone. Then I got a taste of parties. At first, all this caused great excitement. Every night we would go together with friends and I would drive them around the city, or we would go to a club and hang out until the morning. I felt all-powerful. I always got away with any kind of jams. Broke a window at school, Dad paid. Broke someone else's car, Dad paid. Beat someone, Dad paid. I didn't need a woman's attention because that was enough. Girls don't need much. I gave them flowers, phones, clothes, just gave them money, and they were mine. It was so simple. Over time, easy accessibility became annoying. I wanted something more extreme, interesting. And one day, after leaving the club, I came up with a crazy idea. My friends and I had a bet that I could surprise them within an hour. So the first thing I saw on the street was an ambulance. It was parked at one of the entrances. My friends were looking at me, and I stole the car. It was just open. I turned on the signals and drove at full speed. Damn, it was something. I was laughing. On the way, I gave everyone the middle finger. I didn't care because I was invincible. Of course, the car was found later, but they figured me out. As always, the police came home. I opened the door, and they began to rub me something about a number of violations. I yawned back at them and asked sleepily, "How much?" Money decides everything. But then my father came up to me, and of course, all the employees knew him. They immediately told me what I had done. My father took a deep breath. I know that look. It meant that he was displeased with me. He'll probably threaten to block all my payment cards again, take my car, and so on. That's not all. He didn't just steal a car. The ambulance was on the road, and the doctors had to hospitalize a seriously ill child. When they reached the street, the car was gone. In general, that child got worse. The parents went to see your son, they said. Damn, I thought, but not that. Can't I get away with it this time? I thought. After the police had left, telling me to report to the police station and visit the family on my own, my father called me into his office. I sat down in a chair, and Dad took out the alcohol, poured it into a glass, and drank it in one gulp. When you were born, I couldn't believe my luck. I promised myself right away that I would give you everything you ever wanted, but especially a choice. The ability to choose your own path in life. Choose everything from the style of clothing, school, profession. I didn't have that. You know, your grandfather and his father were unwavering. They chose the future for their children. The road was predetermined, but I didn't want to be stewed in this mess. I wanted to be an architect. Even just secretly signed up for a course. Of course, my father found out about it and was furious, my father began to say. I wasn't sure what he was getting at, but then father said that he was forced to become a senator, that is, to follow in the family footsteps. And when I was born, he said he wouldn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do. Every time before I buy something for you, or choose an educational institution, I asked you, suggested options, and asked your opinion. Have you ever felt violated? What happened to you, son? Why did you do this? He asked. I didn't know what to say. Perhaps he gave me too much choice. I was just bored and didn't want anyone to get hurt. I went out of my father's study, drooping in myself, and locked myself in my room. I've never felt worse. I had nothing to say for myself. This time, he didn't go to the station to solve my problems. I understood everything, packed up and went myself. I was fined and told to work community service hours. Yes, I didn't hold a broom with a rod in my hands, but I didn't say anything. Then I went to the hospital to see the family. This was the most difficult test. I was trembling with excitement. Found the room and saw that there was a boy about 6 years old. Next to him, his mother. She was asleep, sitting on a chair. She woke up when I came in and didn't know who I was. I barely had the heart to tell her who I was. There was so much anger in her eyes. She turned to me and slapped me a few times. I was just silent and didn't move. She had every right to do so. In our room, the nurses immediately gathered and took me out. She barely managed to calm down. She called me almost a murderer and chased me away. It's a good thing no one there knew who my father was. I didn't want him to suffer for my thoughtlessness. Then I went up to the chief doctor and found out the boy's diagnosis. Turns out he needed an expensive operation. I didn't hesitate to ask how much. I needed a lot of money. After I got out of the hospital, I went straight to Max's. Max is an old friend of mine. He's been looking at my car for a long time, so I sold it on the spot, took the money and went back to the hospital, put the wad of money in an envelope on the doctor's desk, and told him to do the operation immediately. Then I asked not to tell my name to the boy's parents. When I got home, my friends called me. They've lost me since yesterday. I felt so bad that I wanted to share it with someone, and I told them everything. The only response I got was, "What are we going to do today?" That's when I realized that no, they are not friends. I hung up and went to bed. After this situation, I did not leave the house for some time, only worked public working hours. I didn't talk to anyone at home. Then I went back to the hospital where I found out that the operation was performed on the boy and it was successful. You can't imagine how happy I was to hear that. Did I ever manage not to screw up? Elated, I ran out of the hospital and ran to my dad's office. Emotionally, I told him the good news and hugged him. Then I apologized for everything. Dad was silent for a long time, but then he said that he was proud of me. It was then that I realized what I wanted to do in the future. After leaving school, I went to university, and after that, I opened a small charity fund to help sick children.